Alright, class, let's go ahead and get started. We're on lesson 4. Make sure you go ahead, pause the video, and mark start lesson 4, and then a region of diversity. Then unpause when you're ready to move on. So let's go ahead and get started. The English Middle Colonies, New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, and Delaware, were quite diverse or varied. These colonies were home to people of many different ethnic backgrounds and religions. They became known for tolerance of these differences. They also became known as centers of commerce. Their central location and fine ports made them ideal for trading and distributing goods both north and south. Outside the port cities, fertile soil and a mild climate encouraged farming of wheat, corn, and other grains. Farming was so successful that growers were usually able to produce a surplus, or more than they needed. They could sell the surplus to the other colonies. For this reason, the middle colonies were sometimes called the breadbasket of colonial America. A crossroads of ideas as well as trade, these successful colonies helped establish important American principles such as trial by jury and freedom of the press. They were also home to some of the most influential colonial figures. Among them was author, inventor, and thinker Benjamin Franklin. So let's talk real quick. For what reason were the middle colonies called the breadbasket? Why were they called the breadbasket? Go ahead, pause the video, and talk about this with your partner. And now go ahead and start copying down these notes, and we will move on to the next part in 3, 2, 1. So we're going to be in a new section called New York and New Jersey, so make sure you write that down in your book. Go ahead and pause the video, and we'll carry on in 3, 2, 1. England and the Netherlands were at war in Europe for much of the late 1600s. In 1664, English King Charles II decided to try to gain control of New Netherland to expand his colonies in North America. He put his brother, the Duke of York, in charge of seizing the Dutch colony and putting it under English rule. The Duke of York sent a fleet of English warships to New Netherland. English troops reached the colony in August 1664. The English commander, Colonel Richard Nicolls, demanded that the Dutch leaders in New Netherlands surrender the colony immediately. Peter Stuyvesant, the Dutch governor, wanted to fight the English. The Dutch colonists refused. They saw no chance of victory against the powerful English navy. They thought it best to surrender on reasonable terms. Nicolls became the governor of England's new colony. England changed the name from New Netherland to New York in honor of the Duke of York. New Amsterdam became New York City. The Duke of York soon granted some of the colony's land to two friends. The friends, Lord John Berkeley and Sir George Carteret, received the land west of the Hudson River. Their holdings became New Jersey, named for an island between England and France that Carteret had previously governed. So here's some of the notes. Go ahead and write these down. And we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. Under English rule, the colonists in what had been New Netherland were allowed to live much as before. People continued to speak Dutch, particularly north of New York City. They could continue worshiping in their own churches. Most of those who held land were allowed to keep it. The practice of granting farmland to settlers continued. The English also agreed not to place troops in people's houses without paying for them. People had come to the colony from all over Europe because the colony was, for the most part, tolerant of religious and ethnic differences. Women, too, had more rights here than elsewhere. They could own property, keep shops, and engage in the fur trade. The Dutch had also been active in the slave trade and brought enslaved Africans to the colony to build the settlements or to help farm the land. Though enslaved people had few rights, under the Dutch they did have a path through which many could become free. Those working directly for the Dutch West India Company could gain what was called half-freedom, supplying slave labor only at certain times of the year. Let's go ahead and copy these notes down, and we will continue in 3, 2, 1. One way in which the English differed from the Dutch was in their treatment of enslaved people. This was partly because English authorities feared rebellion from the growing number of enslaved people. They passed a law preventing enslaved people from gathering in groups of more than 2. They also made it more difficult for enslaved people to win freedom and much easier to force freed Africans back into slavery. English authorities also feared criticism, which they said might lead to unrest. In 1733, a colonist named John Peter Zenger printed newspaper articles that strongly criticized the governor of New York. Arrested and put on trial, Zenger was defended by a well-known lawyer named Andrew Hamilton. Hamilton insisted on a trial by jury, which is a group of peers who decide if someone is innocent or guilty. He then argued that newspapers must have the freedom to print material critical of the government. The judge disagreed, but the jury did not, and Zenger was found not guilty. The trial helped establish two important American principles: the right to a trial by jury and freedom of the press. So go ahead and copy these notes down, and we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. So we are going to start a new section. So right here, make sure you go ahead and write that down. And then we'll continue reading in 3, 2, 1. Okay. William Penn came from a wealthy English family. His father had even lent the King of England a large sum of money. In 1681, the king repaid the debt by granting land in North America to Penn. The land was called Pennsylvania in his father's honor. Some years before, Penn had joined the Society of Friends, or Quakers. Some of the members of this Christian group had been jailed and even killed for their beliefs. They believed that each person could have a direct relationship with God. They also thought that all people should be treated fairly. They believed women were equal to men in God's eyes and allowed them to take on roles much larger than those in other religions. Quakers were against war and refused to join the military. In time, they would become strong opponents of slavery. Penn himself had been jailed more than once for his beliefs. He wanted a place where Quakers and others could worship without fear. He called his colony a holy experiment to prove that people of many faiths and backgrounds could live together peacefully. Penn explained his plans in his publication Frame of Government and made them part of the Charter of Privileges under which the Pennsylvania colony was governed. In addition to freedom of religion and trial by jury, the charter set up an elected assembly that could propose and pass laws. However, not all colonists had the right to vote. In addition, a strict moral code limited some personal activities. For example, the performance of plays was banned. So go ahead and copy these notes down about the Quakers. And we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. So we moved on to the next page. When the king gave Penn the land for his colony, a native people called the Lenape were living on it. Penn insisted on paying the Lenape for the land. He believed that Native Americans should be treated justly. His sons, however, did not share those views. After he died in 1737, they used a false document to claim that the colony was entitled to a walking purchase of more Lenape land, the distance a man could walk in 1.5 days. They then hired the fastest runners in the colony to cover twice as much land as the Lenape had thought they would. That's shady. Go ahead and copy these notes down. And we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. When Penn founded Pennsylvania, he planned its main town or capital city. He called it Philadelphia, Greek for City of Brotherly Love. He located it where the Schuylkill River and Delaware River meet. This seemed like a good spot for a trading port, since ships could sail down the Delaware into the Atlantic Ocean or northwest on the Schuylkill to the interior part of the colony. Penn had lived through some terrible disasters in London, and so he wanted a city where disease and fire could not spread so easily. He created a grid of wide, tree-lined streets with many small parks and gardens. On them he planned brick and stone buildings that would not burn. Go ahead and copy these notes down, and we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. People from all over Europe came to Philadelphia. Many came because they could earn a living much more easily than in their native lands. They also appreciated the rights they could enjoy there. As trade grew, the city prospered. People who specialized in different goods and crafts, butchers, bakers, silversmiths, cabinet makers, and blacksmiths, opened busy shops. Outside Philadelphia, many immigrants came to farm the land. Among them were German settlers who practiced the Mennonite religion. Some belonged to a stripped group of Mennonites called the Amish. These people dressed plainly and lived very simple lives. Their descendants are sometimes called the Pennsylvania Dutch, but that does not mean they are from the Netherlands. It refers to their German background and the language they spoke, Deutsch, pronounced Deutsch. It's the German word for German. So go ahead and copy these notes down, and we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. South of Philadelphia along the Atlantic coast was the area known as Delaware. Swedish traders had come there in 1638 and claimed it as part of their colony of New Sweden. They built a settlement called Fort Christina near what is now the city of Wilmington, Delaware. Insisting that the Swedes took Dutch lands, Peter Stuyvesant had captured New Sweden in 1654 and made it part of New Netherland. 10 years later, it became an English possession along with the rest of New Netherland. When the English king granted Pennsylvania to William Penn, Penn was worried because the land had no Atlantic coastline. Ships sailing from the port of Philadelphia had to go down the Delaware River to reach the ocean, and the river sometimes froze in winter. Penn asked the Duke of York to sell him the area we now call Delaware, which did have an Atlantic coastline. The Duke agreed. However, the Swedish, Dutch, and Finnish colonists who already lived in the area did not like the idea of being controlled by Pennsylvania. They wanted to make laws for themselves. So in 1702, Penn allowed Delaware to create its own lawmaking assembly. So we're moving on to life in the middle colonies. Go ahead and write that down in your notes, and we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. The English claimed the middle colonies, but the people who settled there came from many places besides England. The diversity of backgrounds and religions helped make the middle colonies unique. Only a few colonists were wealthy landowners and traders. Many were shopkeepers, craft workers, and small farmers. They worked hard, but there were great opportunities. Farming was difficult with land to clear and weather to worry about, yet even small farmers could prosper in the middle colonies. So go ahead and copy these notes down, and we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. Many endured difficulties hoping for a brighter future. In the cities, young boys often signed up as apprentices or trainees learning a craft. They had to promise to work for several years with the master training them. To get to America, some people signed indenture agreements. They promised to work as servants for a certain number of years in exchange for having the cost of their trip to America paid. At the end of that period, they usually got a piece of land, a suit of clothes, or a set of tools, and their freedom. Enslaved Africans found it harder and harder to become free. However, the movement to end slavery was growing. Go ahead and copy this red note down, and we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. In addition to economic advantages, many people came to the colonies for religious reasons. Some, like Quakers, Jews, and Mennonites, came to the colonies to practice their religion more freely. Others were attracted to new religious movements. In 1739, George Whitefield, an English preacher, returned to the colonies to lead a Protestant movement known as the First Great Awakening, because it awakened strong religious feelings. Traveling through the colonies, Whitefield preached to huge crowds of people from many different backgrounds. He called for better treatment of enslaved Africans, yet he was also in favor of slavery. Go ahead and copy these notes down. And we'll move on in 3, 2, 1. Preachers were not the only public speakers the colonists went to hear. Political speeches were also well attended, and by the 1700s, printers were distributing newspapers that often contained political news and criticism. The New York Gazette, New York's first newspaper, began publication in 1725. It was put out by a master printer that William Penn originally brought to Pennsylvania to print religious materials. Words were central to the life of Philadelphia's most famous resident, Benjamin Franklin. Franklin opened his Philadelphia print shop in 1728. He married a woman who ran a bookshop. In 1731, he helped found America's first library. A year later, he began publishing Poor Richard's Almanac, a magazine famous for its proverbs or wise sayings, such as "There are no gains without pains," and "Well done is better than well said." Franklin also wrote many other works, including his autobiography. Go ahead and copy these notes down, and we'll wrap it up in 3, 2, 1. So, go ahead, if you finish, do whatever work Mr. Cooper has up for you up on the board, and we'll call that a wrap.